Well, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who were here earlier, I was up with Tom Emmer, who has been doing this for years and years. But now I'm here with what hopefully will be the future of crypto policy in the United States Senate. We have Mike Rogers, Bernie Moreno, and Sam Brown, and I'll give them a moment to introduce themselves here in a minute. I do want to say the title of this is Can Crypto Swing the Senate in 2024? And I wanted to provide a little context about that. The Senate is, I think, a really important place for the crypto community to be looking in the election. And, you know, at the Blockchain Association, we are very bipartisan. We have really strong champions on both sides of the aisle. But we also have two really big enemies, and that is Gary Gensler as head of the SEC and Elizabeth Warren, who is a Democratic senator from Massachusetts. And so, these are all Republican candidates. And I do have to say, it is very clear that if the Republicans control the Senate, we will be clear to never get people like Gary Gensler elected to the SEC ever again. And we'll also diminish Elizabeth Warren's ability to influence the Senate Banking Committee agenda. So I think, of the presidential election, the House elections, and the Senate elections are uniquely important. I believe we're only 36 days away. I was corrected earlier. I was going to say 35. 36 days, 5 hours till this election is over. And certainly a lot of activity going on. And for those of you who have been following even the mainstream media, it's very clear that crypto is playing a huge role in these races, both from kind of a political activity perspective, but I think most importantly from the crypto voter perspective, which we'll get into a little bit here today. But first, I really want to take a moment so you can get to know these folks, because I think these are faces that we're going to be seeing. So for each of you, and do take your time, we'll start with Mike Rogers. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your race and how it's going, and what brought you to crypto.
Great. Well, thanks for having me here today. Thanks for taking a few minutes out of the show to be here. Mike Rogers served in the United States Army, was a special agent with the FBI, working organized crime in Chicago, then got off into Congress and became the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee before I left Congress about 8 years ago. The last 8 years, I've been into cybersecurity, a whole host of companies, both from firewall protection to AI-developed deep and dark web trawling for stolen credentials. So we've kind of covered the gamut in our cybersecurity efforts. How did I get into crypto? First of all, as an FBI agent, they use a really interesting thing. When they first get there into the FBI Academy, they teach you pretty quickly that it's never just the money in a criminal enterprise. It's always the money in a criminal enterprise. And so I got interested in crypto by watching what was happening in the Silk Road and how they were using that to try to circumvent laws in and around the world at that time and use it to trade guns and weapons and other activities, drugs as well, and became fascinated with the technology of crypto and what it could do in the hands of good. And so that's how I kind of got into it and realized how important crypto is going to be for us if we make sure that it is developed here, innovated here, and companies can be here and grow here. If we don't do that, we are going to be in trouble when it comes to next generation cryptocurrency. And so that's how I got in it. That's how I got to cryptocurrency. The race very quickly. We just had a poll come out last week. I'm 5 points ahead of my opponent. More importantly to this crowd, I'm sure you're pretty excited about this, got the Farm Bureau endorsement for the first time over 30 years. I know that was going to get you out of your chairs. I see that. I see how excited you are.
We love commodities.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's a crypto joke. Nobody got it.
Yep.
No, thank you very much. Bernie Moreno, please let us know a little bit about your background. You actually, I know, have a big connection to this space. Also, about your race and how you originally came to crypto.
Yeah, certainly. Well, thank you for being here. You know, I said, think about this for a second. 10 years ago, the conference like this would have been a couple hundred people talking about Bitcoin and blockchain, and you'd had everybody go up to you going, can you explain it to me? Which I always said, if you can explain to me how your cell phone works, I'll explain to you crypto. Until you really want to know is what can it do? And everybody thought Bitcoin was going to be a fad, crypto was going to be a fad. I had been in the dealership business. I bought my first dealership from Roger Penske when I was in my 30s, built 15 dealerships over 10 years, sold those to start my blockchain company. And what we did in a company called Champ Titles is we went to state governments and said, let us get rid of your legacy systems. Let us build you a blockchain-based digital titling system that uses blockchain to keep track of car ownership. You can imagine that sales pitch 5 or 6 or 7 years ago lost a lot of people, a lot of bureaucrats especially. But believe it or not, we got our first shot in West Virginia. We're actually the Bureau of Motor Vehicles titling system in West Virginia. We're now in 9 states. About a year and a half ago, I made the tough decision to run for Senate, and I knew that it would jeopardize my technology company. So I sold my shares of that company to Stephen Cohen. The company is now thriving beyond comprehension. And I'm running for one simple reason. Look, innovation has to happen in this country or this country's doomed. And this isn't a fight for crypto long term. The crypto just happens to be at the tip of the spear today. But if we don't get this right in this country, we're going to see innovation blossom all over the world. We're going to miss a huge opportunity. But you need people in elected office that actually know what they're talking about. My opponent is Sherrod Brown. He's not Elizabeth Warren, but he's Elizabeth Warren's henchman. He's actually the chairman of the banking committee. And I'll tell you this, you could go to, in a case of Cleveland, a Cleveland Browns football game, take a football, throw it into the stadium, and whoever caught that ball is more qualified to regulate crypto than Sherrod Brown. This guy has no idea. He's been in elected office for 50 years, never had a job in the private sector ever, graduated from Yale University with a major in Russian studies, and we put him in charge of the United States banking system. What could go wrong? So look, I have a superpower in DC, which is I wasn't born in this country. I will never be president of the United States. My wife has made it clear that she's with me for 2 terms, or a 3rd term is with a second wife. I've been married for 35 years, so this is 2 terms. We need people from the private sector to go to DC to serve and then come home. So hopefully that some of you in this audience that at some point say, listen, this isn't what I expected to do, but the only way we fix this country is by sending outsiders to Washington, D.C. that actually understand the technology that they're being asked to regulate. So that's what I hope to bring to this industry.
Sam Brown, tell us a little bit about yourself, what brought you to crypto, and what's going on in the Nevada Senate race.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here. I could not have imagined speaking at a crypto conference 10 years ago. So my history to this point is maybe a little bit unorthodox. Anyone here in their 40s? Couple of you? Any of you in your 30s? All right. So the majority of this audience and I have something in common. We're not grandparents yet. And so I was a senior in high school on 9/11. Can you hear me? Went to West Point from 02 to 06 and became an infantry officer. So we have a saying in the Army, and I know there's some Navy guys out here somewhere, that if you're infantry, you're kind of a knuckle dragger, maybe a little bit hard-headed, thick-skulled. And so I got a chance to lead soldiers in Afghanistan, but came back, as Mike Rogers referred to earlier, having lost my face. Joking, Mike didn't say that about me, but but look, guys, here's the thing that kind of ultimately brought me here was a sincere love of country. And if I go back to West Point, one of the papers I did some studying on was about the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Now, within that, and I'm probably getting really wonky now, but within that, you kind of find this thing called Section 230 that has had so much impact on social media, right? There's a big debate about it. And it occurred to me that we had a bunch of folks who at that time in 1996 had no idea what the internet, what social media was going to look like decades down the road. And that their policy, their legislative decisions at that point, when they could not begin to fathom it, has had such a huge impact. And we're at that point again, and maybe to an even bigger degree. around crypto and blockchain. And the folks that are currently in positions of maximum influence and power, at least within this administration, and whether it's Gary Gensler or Elizabeth Warren or Sherrod Brown, are hostile to something that could be part of the brightest future, the economic revolution, not only for our country, but for the world. And yet we have zero predictability and stability in our laws and our regulations. So if we can rewind the clock with the knowledge of what the internet has become, back to 96, would we have approached things differently? We cannot make that same mistake again. So after the military, I went out in the private sector and I started a pharmaceutical service company. I became a dad. I'm invested in the next generation. In fact, my daughter, she's my middle child, is right here in the front, Esther. We've got to invest now. Thank you. We've got to invest now, whether it's politically, it's in industry, as a nation, in the next generation. We're all here because someone gave us an opportunity to be here, whether we knew them or not. People sacrificed, people served this country, not just in uniform, but in building industries. We are all the beneficiaries of that. And we have an obligation to those coming after us to make sure that they have something special too. And when we're talking about crypto, it is so dynamic. It is so important that we get this right. That's why I'm invested in being a part of this right here at Mainnet, but I'm also running because we just have so much at stake in this election. And so in the Nevada race, it's a very tight race. It's so tight that we call it a margin of error race. Every poll comes out, we're within margin of error. The last one showed me just slightly behind at 1.5 points. I mean, this thing is going to be a toss-up. We're probably going to go to sleep that night and be, waiting for results to keep coming in the next day. That's what I expect. But we're in a position to win. And when we win, not only will we have the benefit of a Republican majority and the Senate to make sure we get confirmation of good people across the board, but especially for this industry, we'll also have someone who has become an adopter of crypto and wants to be a fierce champion for it.
Great. I've got a couple questions for each of you. Maybe we'll start with Bernie Moreno, but if others want to chime in, feel free to do that as well. My favorite poll of the year, which is going to be replaced tomorrow by new polling, is that 1 in 5 voters in swing states, and all of you represent swing states, considers cryptocurrency an important issue in the upcoming election. And I was chatting with Tom Emmer earlier, and he was kind of talking about that people are really feeling that they've been left out of the system, and they see this as an opportunity, whether on the tech side or the banking side, as maybe bringing them back into that system. I guess my question maybe for you, Bernie, is are you hearing from crypto voters on the ground? Like, are you feeling that presence in Ohio? Is it something that people actually care about?
Yeah, they care a lot about it because at the end of the day, America was created because we fought a revolution about a king that wanted to tell us what to do, how to live our lives, and completely control us. The difference is that now we're 248 years later, and we now have somebody who wants to be queen with a guy who's going to be a henchman that actually tells us how to live our lives. Look, they want to tell us what kind of car to drive. They want to tell us what kind of stoves to have. They want to tell us that we're not allowed to own Bitcoin, and they don't even understand what it is. I mean, that's a fundamental assault on our rights, and it's a philosophical difference between, do we get to decide what we do with our money, or does the government get to decide? But what this also comes down to is if you disconnect financial controls from politicians, if politicians can no longer control and manipulate financial markets, they're out of power. And that's a really good thing, because the last thing we want is a government that has an overbearing presence in our lives. The government's supposed to serve us, not the other way around. So I think voters intuitively understand that, and they're plugged into it.
Mike, I'll go to you next. I recently saw you did a piece in the Washington Examiner called Saving Crypto from Democrats. And you talked about kind of the link between crypto and national security. Can you talk a little bit about how crypto can actually help bolster U.S. national security?
Yeah, one of my big fears is we keep pushing crypto overseas, and it will be easier to open a crypto company, start a crypto company overseas than the United States. That's dangerous for us for a whole host of reasons. And in the beginning, people talked about this notion that it was going to be used for money laundering, or it was going to be used to funnel money to terrorists. And you can just talk to the Israelis to understand that's exactly how they weren't. The Hezbollah and Hamas were not using crypto to fund their operations. They were using non-government agencies, not-for-profits. They were moving real money through these other existing entities, financial entities. With crypto, you have an opportunity through blockchain to discover, if you had a warrant, to be able to discover the path of that money and where that money goes. I think it is much better keeping it here. About 5% of all financial transactions through banks are money laundering. Less than 1% they are finding with crypto. That in and of itself should tell you that this is a much better system. And what I worry about is that, as Bernie was saying, you get a whole bunch of people who think they understand this problem and think the only way to protect Americans is to regulate the snot out of this thing. And that is exactly what we ought not to be doing. When you think about the couple of ones that just came out, one out of FinCEN, which is the Financial Crime Center, just mandated that 30 million small businesses are going to have to give their personal financial information to the government, right? No warrant, no pass. Congress did not pass legislation to do this. And so they're talking about 20 employees or less. It's about 30 million companies now are going to get wrapped up into this FinCEN rule. That means they're going to have to fill out paperwork and send it into FinCEN. I think this is a disaster waiting to happen. Imagine if they get their arms around crypto. What are they going to do? This worries me a lot. The second one is, if you don't wonder why this is an important issue and you should be voting your values on crypto, by the way, California Newsom just vetoed an AI bill that was going to hold these companies to a higher standard liability for anything that happened with AI, which would absolutely kill innovation. And so if you think about where Democrats' heads are at on crypto, it is to overregulate, regulate, confine, and I think that's what's so dangerous. If we use this appropriately, you'll start cleaning up money laundering. You'll start cleaning up drug trades and other things that are happening through crypto. That's why you want it, and you want it here so that you have American ingenuity. You get this over in China and fill in the blank other country, much more difficult for us to have any sense of how to keep this thing in the middle of the lane, doing what it's supposed to do, is be an economic engine.
Sam, let's go to you next. You spoke about this briefly earlier, but want to see if you can elaborate a little bit. I think crypto innovation is incredibly important, obviously, for this crowd, but so is just innovation more broadly. Kind of what are your thoughts about what we can do to bring the U.S. back to that leadership position on innovation?
Yeah, we desperately need to be a leader in this space, among others, and as Mike said, there's challenges to that across the globe. There's other places like the EU, Singapore, Hong Kong are looking to kind of edge us out, but we have that opportunity to lead, but we cannot lead without predictability around regulations and the laws. And that's been one of my sort of core concerns, and why I think the Senate, the title of today's session is, "Can Crypto Swing the Senate in 2024?" The reason this is important is because not only is the Senate a key part of passing laws, but the Senate is also a key part of confirming folks in the administration. And if we don't have the right leaders with the right vision and the regulatory side that the Senate will be confirming, then we will see this, the potential for targeting, but also just shifting of regulation. So a permanent and a regulatory and a legal framework that allows for innovation to occur without sort of buckling it down too tight is key. And look, at the end of the day, the world sort of reflects global economic leadership. and we'll see other countries start to realign where there's leadership. And as crypto and blockchain becomes the pipes and the systems in which the global economy is connected and moves, those countries that are leading there will have an oversized role in sort of shaping and other countries reflecting that image. And I think, frankly, it's important to the U.S., but it's also important to the world that the U.S. is a leader in that.
I want to go from hearing from Sam Brown to talking about Sherrod Brown. I'm constantly having to qualify.
This is the good Brown.
Good Brown, right. We're constantly trying to qualify which Brown I'm talking about. But, it's you touched a little bit on this. He's the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. He's represented Ohio for a really long time. Can you just talk a little bit about why you think this time might be different for, I guess you say, Ohioans, and kind of the contrast that you're drawing between yourself and Sherrod Brown?
Yeah, I mean, the contrast between me and Sherrod couldn't be more stark. This is a guy who's never had a job in the private sector ever versus somebody who's never been in public office. So there's a contrast there. You also have somebody who's just quite frankly so backwards in terms of his thinking. If you remember the Facebook commercial with the little old lady sitting around and she had pictures on her physical wall and said, "I'm going to take you off my wall," and her son's going like, "Yeah, none of it works that way." That's basically Congress. So if you can imagine, they're sitting there talking about AI and they're talking about crypto. They truly have no idea how any of this works, and yet they're putting rules in place. But here's the dirty little secret. The people putting those rules in place are probably people that will end up working for legacy financial institutions that have massive conflicts of interest because they're driving their congressman or their senator to vote a certain way. Sherrod Brown talks about how he's for the working class and he hates lobbyists. Nobody has more lobbyists working in his office than Sherrod Brown does. Because again, this is not a curious person. This is not a person who even bothers to understand how any of this works. He just votes this way. And I want to make a really important point. You asked earlier, what can government do to make certain that innovation happens in America? Get the hell out of the way. None of you want government on your boards. None of you want government on your cap tables. Let a maniacal entrepreneur that has a crazy idea that they can dream of and make it happen, with government creating an environment for you to succeed, not an environment for you to actually build roadblocks. That's the different philosophy. Again, Sherrod Brown thinks he's smarter than all of you. He thinks he knows how to build your companies. Here's spoiler alert. He does not. He has no idea how any of the things that you do work. He's never had a job that wasn't being completely funded by a taxpayer. That's the difference.
Let's go over back to you, Mike. I know you've been pretty thoughtful and passionate about environmental policies that impact people and businesses back at home in Michigan, and including a lot of thinking around electric vehicle mandates. Do you see any sort of parallels between these issues and then some of the issues that we see in the crypto space around environmental concerns?
I do. So EV mandates are bigger in Michigan, maybe the rest of the country. We catch the rest of the country catches a cold. We get pneumonia in Michigan. About a little over a million people involved in building the gas engine in Michigan. So it's a substantial amount of manufacturing jobs related. What the government did is they came in and decided that they were going to interrupt the market by telling companies what kind of cars they had to build. And oh, by the way, crowding out ICE engines, telling you what kind of cars you're going to have to buy. And they're going to try to do this through this crazy incentive system and mandating this to the companies. And it's been a complete and utter disaster. They forgot about one thing. People don't want to buy them. It's unbelievable. Ford was supposed to sell 100,000 of their next EV line. You know how many they sold? 60. 60. They just charged off $5 billion of losses for EVs. Cold weather, Michigan, they don't do as well. A whole host of other problems. They started getting where they wanted to go by not building the engine. They started by building the caboose. So what we've been saying, and I think crypto falls into this if we're not careful, we have to start by updating and modernizing, hard for me to say, our electric grid. Our electric grid can't handle it. 57% increase in load in the next 10 years. And most of that is going to be crypto AI, and oh, by the way, electrification of the grid. And so it's not ready to handle that. We can't build out that fast, our electric grid. That's a crisis for companies that want to innovate here in the United States. So my argument is stop the EV mandates. Don't tell you what kind of car you should drive. We'll get there eventually. And think of this, 500 pounds of critical minerals makes all one electric vehicle. For those of you who are worried about tailpipe emissions, that one electric vehicle takes 4 tons of carbon out of the air. 85% of that vehicle has to be processed in China, right? When you're talking about real workers in Michigan now, you take that same 500 pounds of critical minerals, it makes 90 hybrid cars. That takes 140 tons of carbon out of the air, and you don't have to plug it in. And oh, by the way, you get to keep 1.1 million people building ICE engine parts and components working. Really, really important we do this. So we need to go to modular nuclear. We need to be in all of the above strategy. We have enough natural gas to actually power the fuel that we're going to need for that 57% increase, and it's cleaner than other types of fuel. So if we don't take a step back and say, okay, we're going to build the train first, we'll get to the caboose later, or we're going to be in trouble. And I will tell you, one thing that will drive these companies overseas, obviously regulation, and there's a lot of folks that want to get their hands around your necks in Washington, D.C., but it's also energy needs. We have got to focus on the right side of energy to make sure that we have enough energy to deal with the things that we have to do. And by the way, if you don't send people like this to Washington, Washington will send people to you.
One last quick question for Sam Brown before we have to wrap up here. You wrote a great op-ed recently titled "America Deserves a Financial Alternative and It's Crypto." And you sort of spoke about how this idea that crypto is freedom. Can you elaborate on kind of the role that crypto plays in our digital freedom?
Yeah, it's not only is it the future, the inevitable future, but it also allows us to sort of separate ourselves from some of the traditional financial institutions, connect globally. So Nevada is a state of many, many immigrants. We're a majority minority state. We have 30% of our population are Hispanic, nearly 20% Asian Americans. And so a lot of folks in Nevada have family spread out across the world. And people, it's no surprise, will want to send their hard-earned money back home somewhere. Well, the traditional ways of doing that are not free of issues, whether it's not arriving at all or having to pay someone to get it delivered. And so when I think about what crypto can be, not only can it help family members transfer assets across the globe, but it also creates a global marketplace as well, where someone can have a business that is ships something directly to the U.S. or somewhere else, and the money can flow at the same time as the product or the service. And I think that's just part of the financial freedom that will not only help the United States and also people who are looking to be able to be entrepreneurs in their own way with whatever service or product they have to connect with a global market. But in Nevada, we're a service-based economy, where people are now, because of the economic hardships of this administration, having to pick up a second job or losing their home or something like that. It allows them to connect with a global economy in a way that otherwise is not possible. And I'm a champion for economic freedom for Americans, for the world. And the last thing I just want to say is there's a lot of things that all three of us and some of the other Senate candidates out there would probably rather be doing if we're being honest. None of us need the title, but we're all in for this country. We're all in for this industry. And all we ask is, if you're not in yet, please vote where you can and please contribute where you can, because it's going to take all of us. We can't do this alone, and I've learned that. So please join us in this fight in whatever way you possibly can.
Well, I know I am excited to be working with you guys when you get to the Senate next year, and I'm very much looking forward to election night, because I do think this is a particularly important moment for the crypto ecosystem, but it's a big important moment for, I think, the entire country. So let's give it up for Sam Brown, Bernie Moreno, and Mike Rogers. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah. Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.